Hi, I'm Ria Abraham,
And I'm Meda Sankara,
and this is the Fast Breakdown.
your weekly women's hoops coverage.
Today, we'll be making our preseason rankings of all 15 WNBA teams.
So we organized all 15 teams into 4 tiers. So our first tier is the tanking tier. And at number 15, we have the Portland Fire. So there are two routes that expansion teams can go on. They can be like the Valkyries and really try to make a playoff push and get into the playoffs and make a good run. And then we have teams like the Fire who are obviously aiming for better draft picks. So in the WNBA, there's a rule for expansion teams where their only 1 year record is used for the lottery the next year. So if they tank this year, they have a pretty good chance of getting into the Juju Watkins sweepstakes, which is what they want. They're trying to rebuild entirely from scratch. In the expansion draft, they didn't really choose that many great players. They're paying Bridget Carlton a max. And they do have some okay players like Louisa Geisel-Soter. They have Haley Jones. They have Carla, but they're really not trying to make a playoff push, and it's very evident by their draft pick who is playing overseas and not returning until next year. So the Fire are definitely in ultimate rebuild mode, and they are starting completely from scratch. So I don't think they want to make playoffs. That's not the goal of the franchise, and they are just hoping for better draft picks next year.
Next team that we have is the Connecticut Sun. So the Connecticut Sun really struggled last season. They ended with one of the worst records, and they really didn't do a lot to change that this free agency. They did acquire Brittany Griner, but other than that, I didn't see any huge moves. They lost Marina Mabry, and there's just not any indication that they're going to be any better than they were last season. So I think they're definitely also at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, they're relocating to Houston next year, and this is their final season in Connecticut. So I think they're just trying to make the most of it there. They're paying Brittany Griner the max, which is kind of insane because she was a bench player for Atlanta last year, right? So she's not like an amazing key component of anyone's team at this point in her career, but they're paying her a max, which kind of means they want her to be there for her retirement tour. And they're honestly just trying to embrace a rebuild and, go into Houston and become a more successful franchise there. Because, they've been in Houston before. The Houston comments, I think. So, coming back there, getting acquainted with that fan base, like this year is pretty inconsequential for Connecticut.
And next we have the Washington Mystics. So we've talked about the Washington strategy, which is to get a bunch of draft picks. And it looks like that's kind of what they're looking to do. They get their rookies, they cultivate them, develop those players. And currently they are just working on getting their players up to WNBA standard and competitive on that level. But this year is definitely not going to be a huge year for them. It's most likely, again, a rebuild year working on these players and getting them up to a level where they can compete and get into playoffs and beyond later. But definitely this year they've got a lot of really great draft picks, a lot of really great college players, but the college players aren't really going to stack up that great against the experienced vets. So I'm interested to see how they're going to do in a couple years, but this year is definitely going to be not a high point for the Mystics.
The Mystics are essentially a college team. I mean, literally everyone playing for them has less than a year of experience. So, you know what? They'll be a really fun team to watch out for. Like maybe they'll surprise you with some wins. I mean, last year they were also a relatively young team, and until the last quarter of the year, they were doing pretty well. So we'll see if the Mystics surprise us. But yeah, they really don't have that much experience. Shakira Austin is like the oldest vet, which is kind of insane because she's like what, 5 years, 4 years, not even that old. So we'll see how they pan out. I think I mentioned this earlier, but they don't have any shooters, so they're entirely bigs. It'll be interesting to see how that layout worked out. Um, with their preseason game against the Lynx, it was funny because the Lynx doesn't have a front court and the Mystics don't really have a back court. So it was funny seeing them. I know the Mystics, they played Rory Harmon and Georgia Amore, who are two extremely undersized point guards. And that's definitely an interesting lineup, because Georgia Amore just came off of an ACL tear, and Rory Harmon is a third round draft pick who was good for Texas, but I'm not sure how that translates to the WNBA level. So again, seeing that, it'll be super interesting. But yeah, they're definitely not really in the playoff contention right now. And honestly, their stacking up draft picks method is, I think, what they're trying to go for again.
And then we have the Seattle Storm. So Seattle Storm, one of the teams that has a new coach this year, Sonia Raman. So their team is definitely going to, again, similar to Mystics, they're cultivating their young players, Dom and Ezzy, and all the people who they want to help them succeed in the future. They did lose basically all of their vets. Their franchise players, they're all gone. And we kind of saw when in the preseason game, most teams in their preseason games, they're playing their bench. They're trying to figure out who's going to make the team. For the Storm, they were just playing their regular players, and it was on par with like a Flyers bench. And I was like, oh, that's not actually great. And it's definitely going to be an interesting year for them as they're trying to get back to the Seattle Storm standard because this year I don't really think they have the potential to go much higher than the bottom few spots in the rankings.
They do have a bright spot in Flaujae, though. In the first two preseason games, she's been playing amazing. And honestly, I think the best we haven't seen AZ Flood play because it's Wednesday right now and she plays Thursday. But Flaujae's been playing amazing. Honestly, I'm super surprised. She didn't have a really great college season last year, but she's been playing up to par. Honestly, makes all the rookies look pretty inexperienced compared to her. Like she looks like she fits right in. So you know what? That's the right spot. I'm looking really forward to seeing Flaujae in Seattle, and I think the fans are also embracing her really well, which is nice. Like the draft day thing was kind of surprising and jarring. And I hope that everyone's emotionally recovered from that. But you know what? I'm super excited to see her in Seattle. And if you don't want to watch Seattle, well, watch for Flaujae. She's gonna be great.
I think Flage is definitely a top contender for Rookie of the Year because she's in a spot where she really has a lot of potential to shine and she's going to get a lot of playing time because she's on a team that doesn't have people that fill her position right now. So she's definitely going to really thrive in that role. So I'm excited to see how she does.
So our next tier is the playoff push tier, and this is probably the biggest tier because there are so many teams that made moves in free agency that they were looking forward to getting into the playoffs and maybe even contending. And some of them worked and some of them didn't really. So we have 11 tempo.
So the Toronto Tempo have acquired a lot of really good players. They have Brittany Sykes, Marina Mabry, and then they have some other players such as um I think Christy Wallace was good for them in the preseason game. They did draft Kiki Rice in the draft from UCLA. And Kiki Rice, I think they've only had one game, so I can't really speak too much as to how she's gonna play, but it wasn't a super great game for her. I'm hoping that she'll just grow into it and really be a key piece for them. And then they do have Dara Mabry right now, who's Marina Mabry's sister. So it'll be exciting to see if she makes the roster. And then they have a Nye, so they got the Aces rookie. So we'll see how they all work together. I think in the game, their preseason game, it wasn't amazing. I think they definitely have the potential to be a lot better, especially since in that game they didn't even play Marina Mabry or Brittany Sykes. But it'll be interesting to see how they go, and looking at the pieces that they have, I think they definitely have the potential to make the playoffs. But it's gonna be a little harder compared to some of the already established teams. That's why we had them at 11.
So the next team is the Sky. And the Sky is interesting because on paper, they look amazing. They have Azrae Stevens, Rukia Jackson, Skylar Diggins, Camila Cardoso, Dejanay Carrington, like all these amazing players. It's like, whoa, they're going to be good. But what did we see in preseason?
I guess in preseason, we saw kind of the same old Sky, but again, they didn't have most of these players playing for them. Like half of them were out with injuries, so I don't even know if we can judge them based on preseason, but it didn't look very promising.
I think one thing with the Sky, and it's always been a problem with the franchise, is the meshing of the players in the system. Camila Cardoso has looked really out of sorts in the two preseason games we've seen of her. I think she actually played better with Angel Reese on the floor, which is kind of surprising because a lot of fans say that she doesn't, but I think she does. And it kind of looks like she wants out of the Sky, like from what we've seen in the two preseason games. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah, again, Dejanay Carrington hasn't played yet, Azrae Stevens hasn't played yet. But honestly, I just think the Sky right now, they signed all these players hoping to make a push, and I just don't think it's going to pan out that way. They are a good team and they have a lot of talent, But I just think there are teams that have better chemistry, that want it more, and overall, I think have both better defenses and offenses that are currently proven right now. The Sky, they have Azrae Stevens and Rakia Jackson, who, the Sparks also had, and the Sparks were a horrible defensive team, and, bringing them over and, adding Dejanay Carrington might not be the best solution to a poor defensive system.
So next we have the wings. So we are going to see the Yukon backcourt duo back, AZ Fudd and Paige Beckers. It's going to be exciting to see how their connection works out on the court. And then they again acquired some bigs in free agency. They got Jessica Shepard, Alana Smith. So it'll be interesting to see how this team works out with all these new acquisitions and seeing now that they have like a really complete, solid team at all positions. I'm really hoping that they can make the playoffs and have a much better season and work around players like Paige Beckers to really make their season successful.
They also have a coaching change, they got rid of Chris Koklanis, which a lot of fans really didn't like because he didn't really seem to be coaching that much. And there was that one meme of Paige looking at Chris like really confusedly with the clipboard, and it was really funny. So they got a new coach, Jose Fernandez, who is a friend of Gino Ariema's actually. So he is a pretty good coach. He coached Florida. He's got it all. He coached actually Courtney Williams, who is a really great player. So excited to see him in all of the preseason media that he's been doing. He seems like he's really got a hold of things, like he's critiquing the players, calling them out, coaching them. He told AZ Fudd on the first day, shoot more, shoot more. So you know what? I'm excited to see them with a more firm coach. And again, honestly, they don't look like an amazing team on paper, but they could prove us wrong. I think between them and the Sparks, that playoff spot is super tight. Like, I genuinely could roll a dice. I don't know who gets it. But the Wings, they're going to be much, much, much better than last year. But I don't know if they really advanced into the playoffs. It's a really large jump from going from last in the league to a playoff spot in just one free agency.
And so next we put the Los Angeles Sparks. So the Sparks kept most of their key players. They kept Kelsey Plum, Dearica Hamby, a lot of people who again like took kind of pay cuts to help the team grow. And then they got Nneka Agumake. So it's going to be interesting to see how she messes with this system and she's coming back to the Sparks. And they did let go of Rakia Jackson. They traded her to the Sky. But other than that, they lost Azra Stevens. They kept Ray Burrell. And so they kept most of their key players who were really helping them last year. They just barely miss out on the playoffs. And I think they're going to be in a similar situation this year where because they've essentially maintained the same team.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem for them was an offense. Like, offense, every single night they generated a perfect offense. There's nothing wrong with that. They were a horrible defensive team. Like, there was nothing. And I don't think they've improved that. Like, obviously, they let go of Ricky Jackson and Azrae Stevens, but they didn't add any, like, really key defensive players. I mean, I think Errol Atkins is a good 3-and-D player, and NECA's decent, but I just don't think they've addressed that to the extent where they can really be higher than a playoff push start.
So at number 7, we have the Golden State Valkyries. There may be a little bit of bias because we are Valkyries fans, but I do think that they have really the potential to be in the playoffs once again. They really surprised a lot of people by being an expansion team and making the playoffs their very first year. And they really have kept their, again, like a lot of these teams, they've kept their core. Veronica Burton, and all the they did lose Tammy Faye Bentley, but they are getting Ileana Repair back and a lot of those people who helped them late in the season. And then the acquisition of Gabby Williams was going to be really great for them on the defensive end. So it's going to be exciting to see that.
Yeah, the Valkyries have a really hard roster to make. Like, they invited all these players to training camp. I was like, one of you guys is making the roster, buddy. Like, yeah, so the Valkyries are a super exciting team because they just have so much momentum going into this season. And then, yeah, they retained most of their players, added Gabby Williams, their draft pick, Marta Suarez. I think, like, the one sore spot for the Valkyries is, again, like, the whole entire Flaude trade, but Marta's a good player. It's going to be great. So excited to see them this season. And I think that Natalie Nakase, who is second-year head coach, is going to really help them. improve. And I still think they're only in this playoff push spot because um, they haven't really improved to the extent where I think they're a playoff lock. Because last year they barely made playoffs. But you know what? They're a good team. I can see them advancing higher, but this is kind of what their floor is. So for the next section, we have playoff locks, teams that are definitely going to make the playoffs, but I don't know if they're going to go any higher than that. So at 6, we have the Lynx.
So the Lynx are a really interesting team, right? It's going to be a very different Lynx than we saw last season. The Lynx last season felt like a super team, but now they lost essentially their entire roster. V's going to be injured for the beginning of the season, and they really only have a few key players who are still there. Like Courtney Williams was their leading scorer in the preseason game. And Kayla McBride, we haven't seen her come back, so hopefully she'll come back and really be that shooter that they need her to be. But so when you have like just a few key players, it feels like honestly, I think it's hard to imagine the Lynx falling out of playoff contention because of how dominant they were last season in the regular season. But I honestly don't know that they don't really have enough to actually make a championship push like everyone thought was gonna happen last year.
Yeah, I feel like their championship window closed last year. That was their 1-year period where they got all these free agents, and this was an amazing year. And because of some stuff that happened in the playoffs, and then obviously they didn't really perform to their like capabilities. They didn't really make it, and it kind of feels like now that championship window is closed, how do we rebuild and try to make the team better? And I don't think they're going to full hard stop rebuild. Like they obviously still have Nafisa Collier, they still have Courtney Williams, Kayla McBride. They have Dorka Hughes coming back. They have Olivia Miles from the draft. So they still have all these really good players, and I don't think they're falling out of playoff contention at all. But I don't think they are championship contenders by any means. If they couldn't really win a championship last year with all these amazing players, um, kind of with only a few of those players returning, don't think they're going to be going higher than 6 or 5.
So next we have the Phoenix Mercury at number 5, which is what their seeding was last year when they made their Cinderella run to the finals. So the Phoenix Mercury, again, not a lot of changes to their roster. I don't think they got any free agents. They just lost Satu Sabali. And they still have their core, they still have Alyssa Thomas, Clea Copper, lost their
Joanna
third
Bonner.
big three. Dewana Bonner. Yeah, they do have. So as long as they can really stick to what worked for them last year in the postseason, they definitely are going to be a really strong team. And they've I think they lost some people to the expansion draft, but it wasn't anything they can't replace. So I think as
Yeah,
long
they
as
lost
they
Lexi Held, who actually performed amazing today in the game.
Mhm.
That was kind
And
of a
then
bummer, but
Loxa's gone, but I think that they really are who they were last season, which was really good. So I think they'll be playoff locks.
yeah, I one thing though is everyone's like, "Oh, Satu Salu left. This is kind of a problem." But if you look to how they played last year, they played better when they had a big two. I don't think they played any worse when they had AT and AT and, Clea Copper playing versus, like, Satu Sabli and Ellis Thomas versus, like, all the permutations and combinations. It was much better when they had the big 2 than the big 3, and that's honestly for most teams, like, you can't have 3 primary players, like, it's better if you have 2 and then you have some really amazing role players surrounding them. So, they were able to play their stars good, and they are developing a lot of international people, and yeah, again, they don't really build through the draft. It's not a draft building type team. But yeah, they got a lot of international players and a lot of the people they had last year that ended up being really good for them. So it'll be interesting to see the Mercury. And they have AT and Clay Copper. I don't think they fall out of playoff law.
And then we have the Atlanta Dream, right? The Atlanta Dream, I could argue for them being higher on this list, but they seem to against certain opponents, they just seem to kind of fall apart a little bit. And it's the same reason that they didn't get past the first season of the playoffs. They lost a very I wouldn't even say very strong Indiana Fever team. They looked really strong, but that was a mash of like hardship contracts and injured players who beat the Atlanta Dream, who was like number 2 or number 3, something like that. So it's just the Dream again. They re-signed like Naz Hillman, Jordan Canada, Ryan Howard, Alicia Gray, and traded for Angel Reese. On paper, this is a championship team, right? But it's just making sure that they can all. It's not even that they work together. I think that they had really good chemistry last year too, but it's just sometimes it doesn't click, and when the three isn't falling, then they just don't have it. So I think that's why we had them at number 4.
Yeah, Carlos Mesco's system is live or die by the three for a lot of the players. And I think the problem was their shots really just weren't falling during playoffs last season. And they definitely could have won the series. They were a super talented team. But yeah, and we kind of saw it last year. They were losing against teams like the Dallas Wings who are horrible. Like if you lost against the Dallas Wings last season, and that must have been an off game for you because they were really bad. And you know what? Thing I noticed that game is their three wasn't falling. Like if that happens this year during a playoff series, I don't think they're gonna go to the like anywhere near the semifinals, finals. But again, they have another year now. They got Angel Reese, their core players back. This could be completely different than they could make the championships. But you know what? Because they haven't really changed that much from last year, and we kinda saw the success of last year, I don't know if we can really put them into championship contenders.
So now we have our top 3 teams for this next season. So at number 3, we have the Fever. So for most of last year, we didn't see a fully healthy Fever team. Especially Caitlin Clark was injured for the majority of the season, and we didn't get to see her play in this team. But we saw in preseason, we saw her play, and it was pretty good matchup with her and Kelsey Mitchell, and she works well off the ball. And now that they have Raven Johnson, they really have a lot of options for a really good point guard. And I think that they're really going to be able to mesh together. And this looks like a championship team.
So, the Fever lost Natasha Howard. They got Mo Billings, though. They got Mahisha Hines-Allen, they got Ty Harris, just all good veterans with, Mahisha Hines-Allen has championship experience, so it'll be good to see them on the Fever now, and they played really well in their preseason game, even without Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hall, a lot of their players were just not there. And Raven Johnson was a good bright spot for them too. She was one of the rookies that played really well out of her mind. She got 8 assists, 6 points, like a block, a steal. It was just insane. She was doing really well because her defensive mindset kind of translated really well to the WNBA. And obviously, it's just a preseason game; like nothing is for sure. But she looked great. She was definitely, I think, behind Flaude, like the best rookie that played so far. The Fever are looking to be a championship contender, and last year they got to the semis with literally like a broken bone, like half a leg. They're gonna be so much better this year. So I'm so excited to watch them. So number 2 is the Aces, which is actually where they ended up in the seeding last season. So the Aces have retained Chelsea Gray, Aja Wilson, Jewel Lloyd, Jackie Young, and then they got Kennedy Carter. That is an insane get. And Janiah Barker through the draft, which was, by the way, a steal of the draft. Like, she should have never been drafted at 29. She should have gone much higher. And I understand there might have been some stigma around that. But you know what? Janiah Barker, what do you have for us? Excited. So yeah, they retained all their players. They got a good draft pick. They got Kennedy Carter. They're gonna be great.
Yeah, definitely the Aces really, a lot of teams lost, like they kept 2 players, lost 1, kept 3, lost 1. They really kept together what won them their championship. They kept like every single player who was essential to their run. So it's really going to be exciting to see if they can keep that momentum going and not have that fall off at the beginning of the season than mid-season that they did last season. And then for number 1, we have the Liberty. So the Liberty are dealing with another coaching transition right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play without Sandy Rodello, who is the coach that won them their championship. And I thought it was insane that they fired her after like one. down postseason with injured players. But anyway, they did get Satu Sabali from the Mercury and kept their main players. John Claude Jones had an off year, but I think she's still an essential player. Sabrina Ionescu, Brianna Stewart. So this is like another star-studded team that definitely has the potential to make it really far if they don't get injured and they really lock in.
They also got Hansu as a really nice bench player. Like, she did really good in the preseason game, 20 points. So she came over for the Liberty like, a few years ago, and she was okay. She didn't play that well. I think she's really developed. She's come back, and she was very dominant during that game. And obviously, the Fever didn't really have anyone of her size to even like remotely challenge her. Fever are a very small team, so I don't know if that was a really good indicator of how she's gonna be playing in future games, but she was very good, and that is an insane bench piece to have if she's playing at that caliber. Like, that is crazy. Again, I think last season they had such an amazing roster and did not make the finals, but I don't know. I have a good feeling about them this year. I think if they're able to withstand the coaching change, embrace it, and this coach is really a lot better for them than Sandy Brondello, they're definitely winning this ship. But we never know how coaching translates. We never know about like how the team performs in playoffs because playoffs are a different game than regular season. And yeah, we're just not sure. But I think that the Liberty are going to take this one. They just have such an amazing roster. It's hard to imagine them falling out of at least this top three championship contender team, like list of teams.
That's it for today's fast breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment and follow us on TikTok and YouTube and find us anywhere you listen to your podcast. Thank you so much. See you next time.